Okay, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you all where the study guide is at here. So let me share my screen here. And it's going to be located here towards the bottom of the course materials. You see study guides here. Um, so the only one that we have available is the first one because I'm still working on the other ones here. So if you click on the study guide, it will download a Word document for you all. And then this is what I want you all to focus on with your studying for the first exam here. So let me open it up really quickly so that you all can see. Let's see, it should, okay, no, sorry about that. My bad, that's another document. Hold on, sorry. Um, let me see. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, so this is a Word document that you all can edit here. So this is the study guide here. So as I mentioned to you all before, so again, this is going to cover chapters 1 through 4. As I mentioned to you all before, that if you complete the study guide and you turn it in, you can get some extra credit on the exam. And you're more than welcome to use the study guide on the exam as well. You can use any resources that you'd like, the book, the notes, um, as well as the study guide here. Um, so yeah, sorry that it took a while to get that to you all. But yeah, so the study guide here, this is what I want you all to focus on. It's 50 questions, so I want you all to focus on these questions here for the study guide. And again, it's going to cover what we've covered here within chapters 1 through 4 here. So um, a lot of these are mostly like people, like like describe who these people are, like Christopher Columbus, Ferdinand Magellan. There's also places such as the Jamestown colony. There's also groups of people like some Native American groups, also like the Puritans. Um, so this is definitely what I want you all to focus on when it comes to the study guide here. I want you all to focus on uh, these terms, right? So whether it's places, people, events, locations, this is what I want you all to focus on, and again, groups of people as well. So definitely focus on this, and I can assure you that if you work on the study guide, if you focus on the study guide, I can assure you that you'll do good on the test, okay? Because this is the point of a study guide, right? A study guide is supposed to guide your studying. So I definitely highly encourage you all to work on the study guide. As I also mentioned to y'all before, if you all want to break up the study guide and work on it in groups, you all can do so as well. In fact, that's something I'd probably recommend since the study guide is a little bit lengthier. I would definitely recommend, for you all to do that. Maybe like an example would be like, groups of 5, and then someone takes questions 1 through 10, another person takes 11 through 20. I think I discussed this before, but it's up to you in terms of what y'all want to do with this. But that's a suggestion that I would definitely make is to maybe kind of divide it up and maybe work together. Excuse me. So also, if you need extra time to turn in the study guide, you don't have to turn it in next week. If you'd like to take some time to turn it in later, you can, because I know that next week is going to be, we're going to have a lot of things due when it comes to like the discussion questions, as well as for the unit discussion, as well as um, the chapter, the quiz and the primary source exercise. So primary source document, sorry. So I know that next week is going to be a little bit hectic for you all, and of course this week as well, since you all are studying. So if you need to turn in the study guide a little bit later, that's fine. If you need extra time to turn in the assignments as well, that's also fine too. As I've said to y'all before, um, yes, try to get those in by the due dates. But if you need extra time, that's totally fine. Just as long as you get everything done, I'm totally okay with that. So let me go back over here. Does anyone have any questions on the study guide itself? Any questions on the study guide? And is there anything that I can help y'all with the study guide? Is there anything that you all have questions about? Or um, and then of course also in Blackboard, there's a place to submit it here, right? So let me go back here really quickly. Um, let me share the screen again really quickly. So if you see on Blackboard under the study guide tab where the study guide is located, there's also the study guide submission. So like I said, I know I have it due for next Wednesday, but again, you can turn it in later if you like. You'll just write your submission. You just submit your completed study guide, and then you just put submit here. So it's pretty simple. But yes, you are more than welcome to do so. And again, like I said, if you all want to work together in groups, you can turn in the same study guide. It's fine. If you all like, if the study guide looks exactly the same, that's totally fine. Just as long as everyone turns in their own copy, that's really all that I'm looking for. Um, so with that being said, does anyone have any questions on the study guide? Any questions or anything that doesn't make sense about the study guide? Is there anything that I can help you all with on that? The only thing that we need to complete by this week is the discussion board and the study guide. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay, that's okay, good questions. Okay, so yes, Ebony, the for this week, um well, are you talking about what's due? Yeah, for this week, yes, it's the yeah, it's going to be the discussion board, right? Because we already had, well, if you haven't finished the chapter 4 stuff, you can still finish it. You can still finish it if you need more time. But yes, but for now, yes, try to see if you can complete the discussion board. And again, if you need more time on the discussion board, that's fine, because focus on the test is what I would recommend. Focus on the test, focus on studying for the test. If you need more time to catch up with everything, that's totally fine. I'm not going to penalize you all for that. Focus on the test. The test is more important. The test is more is definitely what I want you all to focus on this week. Anai says, explain how they presented. Yes, okay, that's true. Please bring a Scantron because it will be a Scantron-based test. So yeah, that's a good. I'll make sure to post an announcement to let the rest of the class know. So please bring a Scantron. Um, and then yeah, and then I'll pass out the tests. We'll try to social distance as best as possible. I don't know how many people are going to show up because again, there's going to be the two options. But just be aware that I'm gonna social distance you all. Okay, be just be aware of that because we do need to be safe. So um, if you all would feel comfortable bringing a mask, I would definitely recommend that. I'll be wearing one. I always wear one everywhere I go. So I would really appreciate it if you all would. I mean, it's not mandatory, but definitely, I would appreciate you all if you could please do so. And like I said, I will be social distancing. So just be aware that I might have to tell you, hey, move over here. So it's because I'm not sure how many people are actually going to show up. So I can't really tell you like where we're going to sit or how we're going to do it because I need to see how many people actually show up on Monday. Uh, but like I said, what we'll do is like, let's say there's 20 of us, right? So then okay, we'll spread out as best as we can in the room if there's 20 of us. But again, it depends on how many people show up. But the point is that we'll try to social distance as best as possible. So for sure, I'll try to, we'll, maybe skip a seat and things like that. Yes, Kenneth. Yes, the review has been posted. It's there. If you click on the study guide tab, it's located there, and you can work on it and you can complete it and you can turn it in for extra credit, and you can also use it for the exam. Um, but yes, Annie, so does that make sense? Does that answer your question, Ebony, as well? Kenneth, does that answer all your all's questions, or do you need me to clarify a little bit more here? Excuse me. I believe that is the correct classroom. I would have to go back and check. Um, that I would have to go back and check. What I'll do, Anai, is I will for sure post that information as well. I will post what I just talked about. I will post the classroom, and I will post the basically everything that I said right now. I'll post that in an announcement for anyone else who maybe hasn't been able to stop by. So, but I do believe that is the correct room number. If you're seeing that on your end, that should be the correct room number here. Yes, yes, of course, yeah, absolutely, yes. Just wanted to clarify, and yeah, and you'll get the hang of it once we, because then we'll have some of the tests later on in the semester, so we'll do the exact same thing, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, just be aware that I do have a reputation for being rather strict when it comes to COVID. I haven't gotten it yet, and I don't intend to. I'm going to try my best not to. I'm the type of person, I don't go anywhere. I don't go to movie theaters. I don't, if I get food, I just take it home. Like I don't, I know most everyone's doing that now, but I don't feel comfortable doing that yet. So just note that I'm kind of strict about that, so probably more so than most professors, which again, that's fine. I mean, I got to keep safe. So just kind of understand that, just kind of understand that we'll just have to spread out as best as we can, but I don't think we should have an issue. So But okay, with that being said, and I mean, I haven't even got to the room yet, so I'll have to see what it looks like. I believe it's like there's like a podium, and there should be enough space to where it's not like the desks are like right there next to the podium. At least I hope not, because if that is, we might, like I said, we might have to we'll have to move back or something like that. But we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Just understand that once we get to the room, we'll figure out how it is, and just please be understanding that that I'll have to move people just so that we can be as safe as possible. So. Okay, anyway, with that being said, are there any other questions that you all have? Any other questions? And also do remember that this is optional for you all, that you do not have to show up, because I'm also going to have the online version of the test. But this is for people who would like to, right? So because I know some people like taking tests in person. So because it's a hybrid class, we do have that option to be able to provide that to you also. So again, this is for people who would like to take the test in person and feel that they work better that way. So, but again, so it doesn't have, so that's why I don't know how many people are going to show up. We'll see. I don't think it's going to be the whole class. I don't think the whole class will show up, but we'll see. We'll kind of see how it goes from there. Okay, all right. Other questions? Other questions? Some students, chapter 3 stuff wasn't showing up on Blackboard even they submit. Okay. All right. So what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? That chapter 3 stuff wasn't showing up even though they submitted? So are they saying that they turned it in, or what's the issue? I'm sorry. That way I can go check to see what the problem is, because sometimes Blackboard does have those issues. Let's see. Like they submitted the quiz and it wasn't. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Then let me go and that's a glitch for Blackboard. Let me go back and let me take care of that. That's probably a glitch there. So merging the two classes for the test, or whether okay. No, Kenneth, they're gonna have their test at separate times. So thank you for clarifying. That's another point I also need to clarify, right? That the 2 p.m. class will take their test at 2, and then I'll stick around, and then the 5 p.m. class will also take their test at 5. So I'll be there all afternoon. So yeah, so that's the way it'll work. So depending on which class you're in, that's the time you'll take the test. So I know, like for the class meetings, I'm okay with like us taking, you all popping in on either one. But because it's going to be something in person, we are going to have to keep them separate, just because I don't want to have a situation where like everybody shows up at one and no one shows up at the other, right? So for the test, we definitely will have to, if you're going to take it in person, you have to take it at the time that you actually do meet. So I'll make sure to mention that. These are good points. These are good questions that need to be clarified. So I'll make sure to clarify that if you are going to take it in person, it does have to be during the time, so that way we can maintain social distancing and be safe. So so again, I don't want a situation where like everybody shows up. But okay, yeah, let me go ahead and check on what's going on, why it's not showing up in the grade book here, because I know it's supposed to. I'll figure it out. It's let's see, because I know it's saying that it includes the test and grade center square, so it should show up. But that's fine. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out why it's not showing up. It might be some sort of glitch with Blackboard, which, as I've said to you all before, I wish they would teach us this in school. I've said before, like they should have a class like on Blackboard and all the different learning management systems, because they expect us to be computer programmers when we're not. If I wanted to be a computer programmer, I would work in IT. So, but it's fine. I'll figure it out. Okay, with that being said, other questions, other things that you all have concerns about, or things I need to clarify here? Is there anything else that I can help you with? I'm just taking a drink of water. Anything else that you all have questions about, or does that make sense? So how do you all feel about the test so far? Do you all feel okay with, do you all feel all right with, being able to take the test next week? Do you all feel okay, or is there anything that, is there anything that you all don't really get? Is it still open? Yes, Anna, it still is. It's still open book, still open note. All the tests are going to be open book, open note. You're welcome. is there anything that, from within the first 4 chapters that maybe doesn't quite make sense to you all that maybe I could kind of like help you all with, since this is going to be the last class meeting I'm going to have with you all before the test? Is there anything that I can help you all with? Is there anything that you all have, questions about? Is there anything that, maybe looking over the study guide right now really quickly, is there anything that you see, like maybe take some time to look at it right now? Is there anything that you need me to kind of like help you all with? Kenneth says, how many questions? Okay, so it's 50 questions, multiple choice. You're gonna have the okay, so I'm not against giving you all more time to complete the test. I just don't know if there's a class that comes in right afterwards. So I'm fine with, let's say okay, so because this did happen last semester, where we had a situation where I had some students that still needed more time, and there was another class that was coming in, so we had to move somewhere else. So I'm fine with that. I'm fine if you need more time, especially since I have to stay for the next class anyway, that starts at 5. So I got to be there. So because I live in Mission and I'm going to be going all the way to Brownsville, I'm not going to go to Mission and come back. So I got to stay in Brownsville anyway. So I definitely have time to I would definitely have time for you all if you all would need that. I just don't know. Um, I just don't know. Well, for sure, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you need more time, I can give you that time. I just don't know if it's going to be in the classroom or we're going to have to move somewhere else. We did have to move somewhere else last semester, but yes, Kenneth, if you need more time, that's fine. So the people online there'll be a time limit. So I wanted to give they're okay. So yeah, because this is actually a very good question here that we need to kind of figure out here. Because I did want to give a time limit, but then what happens if we have a situation where you all need more time, and then that could limit the online people. So then I guess what we just won't have a time limit then, right? I guess um because you all can have extra time, so then the online students should also have extra time. So yeah, then I guess there won't be a time limit then. I guess what do y'all think? I mean, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. What do y'all think? Does that sound fair? Because I don't want to have a situation where um it creates like unfairness for one group over another. You know what I mean? So what do y'all think would be the fairest thing to do? Like for the online, for the people who want to take the test online, and then the people who want to do the test in person. Do you think that just not having a time limit, would that be the fairest thing for both groups, or what do y'all think? What do y'all think? Because originally I was going to have a time limit, and it was going to be the same for the online students as well as the in-person students. But if we have a situation where the in-person students might need more time, and I'm giving it to them, then I also want to give that courtesy to the online students. The thing though is that I don't want to set a limit for the online students, because what if the in-person students need even more time, so what do y'all think? I mean, I know that's kind of, I had sort of thought it up, but now I'm thinking about it, that it probably would be fairest to give unlimited time. I mean, what do y'all think? Christopher says unlimited time. Yuli says, okay. So what do y'all think? Do you think we should just go with unlimited time? Like, what do y'all think? I mean, it's open note anyway, so I mean, it's not, it's, what do y'all think? I mean, do you think unlimited time would be fine? Do you think that would be the fairest thing? Because that's what I'm leaning towards. I'm leaning towards that, because I think that would be fair for everyone. So that way everyone has the same amount of time that they need, which is unlimited. So I mean, if there's no objections, I mean, I'm fine with that. I guess we can go with unlimited time. Yeah, that'd be fine. So let's go with that. Let's go with that. So yes, we might have to leave the classroom after an hour 15, but if you need more time, I can stick around. We'll find somewhere else to go. We'll find somewhere. Don't worry. There's tons of classes that are vacant, so we'll find somewhere. So if you need more time, that's fine. Hopefully you won't need until 5 o'clock, but even then, that's fine. You could just, well, if you do need till 5, then you could just go back with me to the second classroom. So, um, but hopefully you won't need that time. I don't think you're going to need like 4 or 5 hours to do the test. I don't think so. This isn't like an essay test. One time one of my essay tests in college, I took 5 hours to finish it, because it was a long test. And thankfully my professor, he let me, because he was just, he he was there in his office working on some stuff. So, I'll extend the same courtesy to you also. Yeah, we can do that. So I guess we can have a limited time for both versions of the test. Okay, I think that sounds fair. Okay, other questions y'all have. We don't need to print out our notes, like if we use our iPad. Yes, that's fine. You can use any device. I know some people like to print out their notes. I mean, me personally, I like to print out my notes because looking at a computer screen all day is just going to hurt my eyes. Plus, I'm older, so I have to kind of pace myself a little bit more. But yes, Anna, yes, you can use any format that you want. Whatever works best for you is totally fine. I don't know. Definitely do make sure that your devices are fully charged because I don't know if there's outlets there or things like that. So I would definitely recommend that. That's why for me personally, I would just print everything out myself. But then again, I know some people are more like, I guess, again, they like to use the electronic devices more so. But yes, you can use it in any format that you like to. That's fine. Okay, anything else that you all have questions about? Is there anything else I can help you all with? Any other, and good, and yeah, once you all take the test, you all will see how it is. So we probably won't have as many questions, for next time. It'll be the exact same format. But okay, yes. Is it multiple choice? Yes, it is multiple choice. Yes, it is multiple choice. 50 questions, multiple choice. Yes, so it shouldn't take too long for you all. Now again, I do recommend for you all to study beforehand because even though you're going to have a limited time, you don't want to be there for like multiple hours. Just kind of finish what you need to finish and then go on with the rest of your day. So definitely do try to study. Maybe you don't necessarily feel like you have to like study all night or something like that, but just study through it and learn the material. And the study guide, I guarantee you, will help you. You will see after the exam is over that you will see that the study guide does help. If we take the exam online, there's no time limit, lockdown browser, and open notes that we need to show you in the. So I believe it's still going to be lockdown browser, but there won't be a time limit. So still, because I still have to make sure that there's not like several of you all taking the test together. You know what I mean? So even though it is open note, I still have to make sure that your work is still yours. So I believe that it still should have the lockdown browser and still like show your notes to the camera. The only change is that there's not going to be a time limit. So and I can do that in the options there. I can set that forth in the options. So that's the only thing. So yes, it's still going to require the lockdown browser only for that reason, like because again, I need to make sure that it's actually you taking the test. Does that make sense, Ebony? Does that make sense or no? Okay, all right. Okay, other questions you'll have? Other questions? Okay, I guess Ebony logged out here in a bit, but she'll be back. Okay, all right. So if there's no other questions, I guess we can go ahead and start with chapter 5 here. The American Revolution, one of my favorite chapters because it's very, very exciting. I've always said I don't know why, ever since I was little, I've always been fascinated by like war and historical, like I guess because for me, I've always found it exciting, right? Like battles and things like that. Like I've always found uh, I was gonna take a World War II class with my professor, Dr. Thompson, but I couldn't because I just didn't have the time. So that would have been really interesting to have, I mean, I know about World War II, but I'm just saying that it would have been nice to have maybe taken a graduate class and actually gotten, really, really into it and things like that. So, but anyway, with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the American Revolution, chapter 5. So, obviously, of course, from what I've said, when we think of the American Revolution, what do you all tend to think of when we think of the American Revolution? Like, let me go back to the course materials here. So when we think of the American Revolution, what do you all tend to think of? Like, what usually comes to y'all's mind first? What tends to come to y'all's mind when y'all think of the American Revolution? Yeah. Let me go to the chat here really quickly. Anything else comes to y'all's mind when we think of the American Revolution? Like what are kind of the first thoughts that y'all think of?
Slavery.
Slavery. Okay, yeah, slavery, war. Yeah, and we will talk about those events here within chapter 5. Now, of course, what we also have to do is we also have to look at why did the Revolutionary War happen? What were the causes of it? Why did the colonists feel so strongly that they felt that they had to leave the most powerful nation in the world at the time, leaving the British Empire, leaving the protection of the British Empire, and basically saying, you know what, I don't care that that I, you know, I'm living with my parents in this nice, you know, fancy 5 bedroom, 2-story house. I'm gonna go get my own apartment, and yes, it's gonna be, you know, 1 bedroom, and it's gonna be, you know, rinky dinky or whatever, but at least it's mine. Like that's what I like to, you know, I like to make that analogy, right? Because the colonists were leaving a really advantageous situation, and they were willing to go out and do things on their own, even if they were going to struggle. So that should tell you something about just how strongly they felt about doing this, right? You know, the concept of liberty. We're going to definitely talk a lot about liberty in this chapter, right? We're going to talk about, you know, Patrick Henry and his famous words, "Give me liberty or give me death." So the fact that Patrick Henry was willing to die for this concept of liberty probably should tell you that liberty is pretty important, right? If people were willing to, you know, to fight and die for it. So that's what we're going to kind of take a look at here within chapter 5. We're going to take a look at the causes of the American Revolution. Now, a lot of this you probably are very familiar with, right? Because they really hammer this home in, you know, in school, right? The American Revolution is something that is taught to us, you know, going back to, I mean, even in elementary, right? We remember hearing about, you know, George Washington and his, you know, cutting down with the cherry tree and all that stuff. You know, a lot of those famous fables and things like that. Um, what we're going to look at here within chapter 5 is we're going to look at how here's one interesting concept that a lot of people don't really remember, or they don't really know when they think of the American Revolution. The American Revolution was not simply the colonists versus the British. The French and the Spanish were also heavily involved in the American Revolution, and the American Revolution itself was not just a conflict confined to the colonies. There was also fighting going on in other parts of the world, you know, because France and Britain were fighting again. Because in the last chapter, we talked really briefly about the 7 Years' War, which basically kicked out the French from North America, right? Where the French lost Canada, the Louisiana Territory was also handed over to Spain, and so France, which had controlled vast portions of North America, had lost all of their North American empire. You know, they just had a few islands in the Caribbean. They would get Louisiana back, though, when Napoleon came to power, but that's not going to happen for a couple more years here. But at this point, the French have been kicked out of North America. So the reason why we have to talk about the 7 Years' War is because the 7 Years' War is what really creates some economic tensions in the colonies. Because in order to pay for the war, Britain needed to, they had to borrow a lot of this money, right? They had to borrow tons of money from banks and from private investors. And so the idea here was that because the colonies had, you know, caused for Great Britain to have to incur all of this war debt, Parliament felt that it was appropriate to kind of pass that cost on the consumer, right? You probably heard that phrase before, right? That, prices are going up, because inflation's going up and things like that, and so everything becomes more expensive, right? So that's not really a unique concept. We see it even here in this chapter, right? We see that the costs are passed on to the colonists in order to, pay for this war, to have fought against the French, and also it's not like with the conclusion of the French being defeated, it's not like there still wasn't a need for British troops now, because now Britain is in control of Canada, they're in control of the Ohio River Valley, and there's a lot of Native Americans that are still in those areas, and so the British are still having to have soldiers there to defend those borderlands and those frontier areas. We also, the last chapter also talked about the proclamation of 1763, which had put a halt on the settlers moving west, and the colonists did not like that. The colonists wanted to continue to move west. They wanted to continue, to purchase land and to cultivate it and to move the country further west here. And so there was a fundamental disagreement about, between Britain and the colonists here. So let's so that's a little bit of the setup. Let's talk about the acts, like the Stamp Act, the Intolerable Act, the Sugar Act. These, of course, is where things really get troublesome when it comes to conflicts with the colonists and the British here. So the Thomas Hutchinson's home, who was the governor and the administrator at the time, was attacked by protesters of the Stamp Act in 1765. So what I want you all to understand here is that these different acts, right? These are looked at as very unpopular, right? And this, of course, leads, to protests, here in North America. So this is where we're going to start to see the beginnings of a uniquely American concept of protesting against the government. You all, I'm sure, have seen protests recently. There's been, like in recent years, like with Black Lives Matter and things like that. There's, you all know what protesting is, right? This concept of going out into the streets, demonstrating, having rallies, and, basically showing your displeasure with what the government is doing. We start to see the beginnings of this due to backlash against these taxes that are being put forth, right? Because again, the idea was that, as we scroll down here, right, consolidating the empire. Prior to the 7 Years' War, London had loosely tried to regulate some of the colonies' economies. We talked about this before, right? That the colonies had basically been left, to kind of do their own thing, to kind of handle their own affairs here. And so, Great Britain was making this change in terms of now having a stronger influence and stronger control over the colonies, and the colonies were not happy with that, right? Because again, this was a fundamental disagreement about who should be making the ultimate decisions. Should it be Parliament, all of, across the, on the other side of the Atlantic, or should it be local government, local leaders, making those decisions? And like I said before, that this fundamental disagreement, which we'll talk about when we talk about the Constitution in a later chapter, is still debated to this day, right? Who should have more power within government? Should it be a strong central government, or should it be a more decentralized local government, like state governments? So that's still a debate that we still have even to this day here, and we will talk more about that as we progress here. So again, various acts forbade colonial manufacturing of items like hats, wool, iron, and trading for molasses with the French Caribbean. So we talk about the Navigation Acts as well. This goes back to the idea of mercantilism, right? This idea that that the colonists had to buy British goods, they had to be imported by British ships, and so this was also becoming a contentious issue because the colonists could try to get some of these goods cheaper from the Dutch or some of these other traders, and they weren't being allowed to, right? So the colonists were being they were being put they were being subjected to very strict customs and importation rules, which you still have these to this day, right? I mean, if you import things from other countries, there are tariffs, which are taxes that are put on those items. So the colonists were avoiding these taxes, right, by illegally getting these items, smuggled into the country, right? So after the 7 Years' War, London insisted the colonists pay a subordinate role to the mother country and help pay for the protection the British provided. So again, if you think about this, there's a lot of logic to this, right? You definitely can see where the British are coming from, right? They feel that, hey, you all are the reason why we had to spend all this money, to fight back against the French. So we'd like for you to kind of contribute here, right? I like to use the example of, like, let's say, let's say your parents are paying for your auto insurance, and you keep getting in all these wrecks, you keep getting all these tickets, and so the insurance premiums are going up because of you, not because of your parents, because your parents haven't gotten any tickets, but because of you. So then your parents go to you and they say, hey, you're the reason why our insurance premiums have doubled. So we want for you to pay that double share because you're the reason why it's happening. So, that makes sense, right? Now, the problem, though, is that Parliament had a fundamental disagreement about how representation should be. So members of the British Parliament had virtual representation. This meant that not every section of the empire was represented in Parliament. They just felt that, Parliament will represent the needs and concerns of the empire as a whole. But the colonists argued that London could not tax them because they were underrepresented in Parliament, right? So this is a fundamental disagreement where the colonists feel that because they don't have direct representation, that Parliament doesn't have the right to tax them. But then Parliament feels that, no, you're part of the empire, so you do get representation. It's just not that direct type of representation. So the type of representation is where they had disagreements here. So they're both correct. It's just, again, it's not a right or wrong thing. It's just a difference of how they went about, constructing the representation. We also had the writs of assistance, which were basically like general warrants that could search ships and try to to search for smuggling for goods that were being smuggled here. So the colonists were concerned because they felt that this violated their due process rights. That hey, there's no probable cause here. They're just searching all our ships here. So then we get to taxing the colonies. We get the Sugar Act of 1764 and the Revenue Act, which threatened the profits of colonial merchants and aggravated an economic recession here. So, so again, we start to see all these different taxes being levied. The Stamp Act is what really pissed people off. And when I teach this in my federal government class, we talk about the Stamp Act and how the Stamp Act is the Stamp Act was different than some of these other taxes because for the most part, Britain had collected taxes through commerce, right? Through especially when it came to imports and shipping and receiving and things like that. So not everyone was buying imported goods. But a whole bunch of people were reading books and a lot of people were print. Remember we talked about this in the last chapter, how a lot of newspapers were coming up. There was a lot of printing presses, going about. So the Stamp Act was a direct tax on all sorts of printed materials. Now, this was the first time in British North American history that taxes were used to raise revenue, right? Because originally, like I said, the taxes were just meant as a way to fund the government, right? To allow for the government to keep operating. But this is the first time where the government is actually trying to make a profit off of people and actually trying to raise money by raising taxes. So this is basically a tax hike. And you probably can already see where the problem is, right? I mean, nobody likes to pay more taxes, right? I mean, everyone gets all upset whenever, taxes are being raised. So it's understandable as to why the colonists were not pleased with this, especially because of the fact that if you think about this, let's say you're one of these let's say you're one of these print shop owners. You run you're Benjamin Franklin and you're running the Pennsylvania Gazette. Now all of a sudden you have to buy these stamps and put them on every single newspaper that you're going to be selling. When the day before the newspapers were fine. So now they're not fine, and they're not fine, and it's not for a legit logical reason. It's just because the government says, you know what, we need to look for ways to raise money. We need to look for ways to tax people. So we're going to start putting stamps. We're going to make it mandatory that everyone has to put a stamp on here. So do you see why people would be pissed off at this? Like that this was clearly a cash grab, that people felt exploited. Does that kind of make sense in terms of why this one was the Stamp Act is what really pissed people off, because they could see clearly what this was. I mean, I could just imagine being in the taverns, just being like, they're stealing money from us, So the British obviously didn't really think this one through in terms of, hey, let's go ahead and piss off the Americans, by just being really blatant with these taxes. So this, like I said, the act was widely reaching and offended virtually every free colonist. Because again, for the reasons I just mentioned, an opposition to the Stamp Act was the first great drama of the Revolutionary Era and the first major split between the colonists and Great Britain over the meaning of freedom. And so we get to taxation and representation, right? So American leaders viewed the British Empire as an association of equals in which free settlers overseas enjoyed the same rights as Britons at home. So we talked about how that this was a fundamental disagreement with how the Americans viewed liberty as opposed to how the British viewed it, right? The British Empire did not view the colonists as equals, so to speak, right? But the colonists felt that they were equal. So, so this was a major contention point. So Patrick Henry led the opposition by proposing 4 resolutions approved by the Virginia House of Burgesses, and the Stamp Act Congress met in 1765 to endorse Virginia's House of Burgesses resolution. So, and Parliament had inadvertently unified the 13 colonies because now all the colonies were feeling the pain of these acts here, they were united in a way they had never really been united before. Now they were no longer Virginians or people from Massachusetts. Now they considered themselves American because they were all being targeted by the British here. So the Stamp Act crisis, however, did not lead inevitably to revolution. Most British colonies in the Western Hemisphere protested the tax, but only about half eventually decided to strike for independence here. And most colonists continue to believe that their liberties were safer inside the British Empire. So there's still disagreements about, you know, in terms of what to do here, right? So a lot of the colonists still felt that, hey, we don't need to move out yet. We just have some issues. Let's try to work them out, and let's see if we can, get those issues resolved here. That was basically what their contention was. We still are we still are British. We don't want to leave the British Empire, but we do need to get this resolved. Then, of course, we started to see more of these protests, right? So no word was more frequently invoked by critics of the Stamp Act and Liberty. So we have, Liberty Tree, Liberty Hall, Liberty Post. This is where people would gather together, and they would have like, protests, where they would even have like, like funerals where Liberty was being buried. Pretty funny stuff, right? Like I always find like I think political humor is very funny. So I always find a lot of that stuff very funny here, because you also have to be smart to kind of get that stuff. So colonial leaders prevented the Stamp Act's implementation, such as like destroying stamps and keeping them from being being circulated here. The Committee of Correspondence was created in Boston and other colonies to exchange ideas about resistance. So we also see the Sons of Liberty, right? They were a very instrumental group that organized to resist the Stamp Act and to enforce a boycott of British goods. So the boycott is what also really exacerbated these issues, right? Where the colonies used the notion of boycotting British goods as a way to get the attention of Parliament to say, hey, we are not cool with this, and we are no longer going to buy, items and goods, from these British merchants here. So a stunned Parliament repealed the Stamp Act, but issued the Declaratory Act, which is the new act that stated that Parliament could pass future colonial taxes. So basically, it said, okay, colonists, we will repeal the Stamp Act. We get that, this was, we get it. We get that, we understand your grievances with this. But this doesn't mean that we cannot impose, it doesn't mean that we cannot impose further future taxes on you all. So just note that we get it. You didn't like this one, but we're going to try something else. So that's basically what the Declaratory Act is declaring, Parliament's, ability to enforce these laws that they pass here. So let's also get to the regulators here. So not the Warren G song, but let's get to the regulators here. So two groups in the Carolinas were known as the regulators in 1760. The regulators were an interesting group, right? And this is similar to what we kind of saw with Bacon's Rebellion. This was another situation where you had groups of people, such as these small farmers that were annoyed, concerned about a lot of the corruption that was going on by the wealthy elites in the area. So the South Carolina regulators consisted of wealthy backcountry residents who protested their underrepresentation in the colonial assembly and the lack of governance, right? So the South Carolina ones, they were a little bit more well-to-do than the North Carolina ones. So the North Carolina ones, these were the small farmers that were upset with the local governments, right? So they both had similar gripes and complaints, right? Basically that they felt that their political needs and concerns were not being addressed, and they wanted to do something about it, right? So the North Carolina militia defeated the North Carolina regulators at the Battle of Almanance, which ended their protest. And tenants along New York's Hudson River in the mid-1760s, this is up in New York, seized land from landlords, but were suppressed by British and colonial troops. So we will see this class warfare, this class instability. We will see this kind of rear its head again when we talk about Shays' Rebellion later on in one of the next chapters here. But this is important, right? Because this is important to see that there are still some economic clashes here between some of these groups here. And again, and it makes sense as to why, right? Because of economic issues and differences. And like I said, when we talk about Shays' Rebellion later on, I'll explain a little bit more further into this. So the road to the rebellion, let's get to the Townshend Acts, named after, the Chancellor Townshend. The 1767 Townshend Act imposed taxes on imported goods, and Parliament believed colonists agreed with taxes used to regulate trade. So the idea was that the colonists were not cool, at least Parliament thought this way. The Parliament thought that the colonists were not cool with being taxed generally by everyone, but instead taxing consumption, taxing. And let me kind of explain this. This is kind of an economic concept here. So if you have taxes just on imports and goods and items, that's not a tax that everyone has to pay because not everyone buys those items, right? So if there's a tax on tea and that's the only tax that's there, then you could just not buy tea and then you would never have to pay taxes. So this is different than the snapback, right? Because the snapback was something where almost everyone was being impacted by this. Whereas with the Townsend Acts, this again was just limited, back to trade, right? And so not everyone was engaging in trade and buying, imported goods. So it only affected the people that really wanted these goods, right? So, but again, this still caused problems for the colonists. So again, so by the next year, the colonies were again boycotting British goods, and that leads us, of course, to Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania. John Dickinson's pamphlet of essays argues for reconciliation with the mother country. So there, again, there's still disagreement about whether they should stay within the British Empire or strike it on their own, right? So colonists preserve all traditional rights of Englishmen. It demonstrated the Enlightenment influence on the colonies, as well as the assumption that the political debate was for the educated elite here. We're going to talk about Thomas Paine's Common Sense here in a bit, how instead of just having this assumption, because this is the way politics used to be discussed, right? Politics used to be discussed simply amongst the elites, the people that were educated, that knew about systems of government. Uh, Political discussions wasn't really for the common everyday people, because a lot of the elitists felt that, oh, government's too complicated, people won't understand it. But with Thomas Paine, we'll see here in a little bit that this is where we start to see more of the everyday people start to get involved in politics. So homespun virtue. So this also talks about that with the continued boycotting of British goods, that this was actually looked at as a symbol of American resistance, right? To move away from the indulgence of the importation of the British, them, sipping their teacups with their pinkies, type of thing, those stereotypes that you probably heard of, right? Like, no, we're gonna get away from that. We're homegrown American. We don't need those. We don't need that hoity-toity stuff. We're good. We're just going to rely on our own wit, so to speak, right? So women who spun and wove at home were daughters of liberty, and the Chesapeake planters owing money to British merchants favored the homespun goods, because this also, as well as the artisans, right? This also, since British goods weren't being bought in America, this allowed for local industry to really ramp up, right? So local merchants to be able to get a foothold on these domestic markets and allow for people to buy domestically instead of buying, imported goods here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit here. I know we've got about 15 minutes left. Let's see if we can finish the rest of this. Okay, let's talk about the Boston Massacre here. Then we get to the Boston Tea Party here. So the March 1770 conflict between Bostonians and British troops left 5 Bostonians dead, including a mixed-race sailor named Crispus Attucks. So the Boston Massacre is interesting, right? Because this is the situation where you had there was growing tensions in Boston, because now you had the permanent quartering of soldiers there in Boston, the housing of garrisons. And so the people, of course, were not liking that. They did not trust, the redcoats there. So you did have a situation where some of the colonists were throwing snowballs at them, and then the British, retaliated. So John Adams famously defended the soldiers in court. 7 were found not guilty, and 2 were convicted of manslaughter. So the interesting point about the Boston Massacre is that this was the first time, of course, that we had, the British, actually fire upon, the colonists. And so Paul Revere's, inaccurate engraving stoked anger throughout the colonies. So, in the book, it shows you the painting of Paul Revere's Boston Massacre painting, which, again, it's totally one-sided. It's not accurate. It just shows the British all like lining up and shooting people like execution style, when that's actually not what happened. It was, it was a struggle between both sides. But because of that propaganda, that was able to really, really galvanize the American colonists, to unite themselves against the British here. Now let's get to the Tea Act. So let's get to the Boston Tea Party. So the East India Company, which just as a quick note here, I don't know if you all knew this, but the East India Trade Company was such a large and influential company that they basically were the de facto government in India. So just think about that, right? Like a private company actually owning, actually being the government. So they were in financial crisis, and the British government decided to market the company's Chinese tea in North America, because there had been some stock issues, speculation that had caused, some instability when it came to the stocks. And so now the East India Trade Company was basically creating a de facto monopoly in North America by basically dumping really cheap imported Chinese tea in North America. So it got to the point where nobody else could buy, any other tea because this tea was just so cheap. So it did create some economic issues here. And so the Tea Act was intended to aid the East India Company and to help defray the cost of colonial government. And so on December 16, 1773, of course, we had the famous Boston Tea Party. Colonists threw more than 300 chests of tea into the Boston Harbor, one of the more famous events in American history, with Samuel Adams, dressing up as Native Americans, then, dumping the tea into the Boston Harbor, which in today's money would have totaled $4 million. So the Intolerable Acts, of course, the British have to respond to this, right? So London's response to the Bostonians' action was swift and harsh. The so-called Intolerable Acts closed the port of Boston until the tea was paid for, curtailed town meetings in Massachusetts, basically trying to discourage them, stopped elections of council members, and instead the council members were appointed, and then authorized the lodging of British soldiers in private homes. So this is the one that people could not stand. They could not stand this so much that there is one amendment to the Constitution, the Third Amendment, that specifically deals with this action and this action alone. So when you read the Constitution, you'll see, hey, this is like really specific, right? They've got a constitutional amendment that deals specifically with not allowing the military to be housed in people's homes against their wishes. So that says to me, you know what? That must have pissed them off so much that they decided to make a specific amendment dealing specifically with that specific issue, that specific circumstance. So just to kind of, throw that out here. And then the Quebec Act granted religious toleration for Catholics in Canada and extended its southern boundary to the Ohio River. So this created some geographic instability because now Americans were concerned that the Ohio River Valley would be closed off to further exploration. I mean, we talked about the Proclamation of 1763 here, and then of course there was also talk that so tolerating Catholics, because again, remember that Canada was formerly a French colony, so obviously, of course, there was a bunch of Catholics there. So tolerating the Catholics in Canada was also a threat to the Protestant Americans, right? And so they were also concerned that the Anglicans would also try to, that Great Britain would try to, foster more Anglican churches in America, which was also something they were concerned about going back to the time of the Puritans. So again, so the coming of independence, so the Continental Congress. So Boston issued the Suffolk Resolves, which urged Americans not to obey new laws, to withhold taxes, and to prepare for war. And to resist the Intolerable Acts, a Continental Congress was convened in Philadelphia in 1774. So now we're starting to see this notion of revolution really ramp up. So the Continental Association, the Congress adopted the Continental Association, which called for an almost complete halt to trade with Great Britain and the West Indies. And then the Committee of Safety would basically be created to enforce the boycotts, right? To ensure that people were not buying British goods, and also to go after people that would maybe try to price gouge to take advantage of the situation. So the Committees of Safety enlarged the political nation, right? Where now the common person was getting involved in politics, right? Because the Congress, of course, they were meeting, and they were passing these resolutions, and then the Committee of Safety would have to enforce it, right? They would actually kind of, you could think of them as like the political police, so to speak, right? Where they were actually enforcing, the kind of like a de facto executive branch, so to speak, right? Where they're enforcing, kind of like, what we see like with like, federal law enforcement and things like that. You can kind of make an argument they're kind of like the precursors of that here. The Sweets of Liberty here. So by 1775, talk of liberty pervaded the colonies, including people of German heritage. And as the crisis deepened, Americans increasingly based their claims not simply on the historical rights of Englishmen, but on the more abstract language of natural rights and universal freedom, such as John Locke's theory of natural rights, which again will be heavily influenced, which is what heavily influenced Thomas Jefferson here with his writing of the Declaration of Independence here. Which I wish we had time. I wish I do have the Declaration of Independence there in the class. So I don't think we're gonna have time to go over. I mean, we'll mention it, but I wanted to show it to y'all really quickly, but I don't think we'll have time. But definitely after what we talk about it, definitely go back and look at it for yourself so that you all can see what's in the Declaration and compare to what we talk about here. So, okay, finally we have the beginnings of the war, April 1775. War breaks out in Lexington and Concord. Of course, this is the famous midnight ride of Paul Revere, because the British are trying to go, and they're heading to the forts to take the arms there. They're basically trying to take the guns and the firearms there to disarm the colonists. And so this, of course, is the famous Midnight Rider, Paul Revere, right? You know, the British are coming, and so they're coming to take, you know, the firearms, right? So the Battle of Bunker Hill, the Battle of Bunker Hill was a British victory, but the colonists forced General Howe from Boston by March of 1776. So General Howe had to abandon Boston. So even though you know, Bunker Hill was a British victory, it was very crippling to lose the port city of Boston. And so the cannon from Fort Ticonderoga was you know, was moved from, you know, upstate New York all the way to Boston, and that is what helped to further solidify Boston's control by the colonists here. And the Second Continental Congress raised an army and appointed George Washington its commander here. Independence. So the goal of this war was independence was not clear by the end of 1775. Again, there were still differing opinions here in terms of whether the colonists were fighting as Englishmen within the British Empire, or were they ready to strike it on their own. The turning point of this, of course, comes from Thomas Paine's Common Sense, his essay, Common Sense. It's actually one of my favorite political writings. I actually have it here in my house, and in my office I have a copy of Common Sense, and it's really awesome. I love Thomas Paine's Common Sense because it's titled Common Sense very appropriately, because the book talks about how that even though, you know, Paine, he criticized monarchy and aristocracy, and he called for a democratic system based on frequent elections and a written constitution. This is not new, right? So this idea of distancing yourself from, you know, monarchies and the rule of divine right, this is a question that's been going on for hundreds of years. But what made Thomas Paine's take on this much more interesting and much more lasting is the way he said it, the way he talked. He discussed it in a way that the common person could understand. Paine termed a small island ruling a continent absurd. I mean, if you think about it, yeah, it's like, you know, it's kind of like he's cutting through the BS and he's saying, you know what, regardless of liberty, democracy, just think about this rationally. The fact that those people on the other side of the ocean are telling us what to do is ridiculous. So that's why I love, you know, Thomas Paine's Common Sense, because he says it in a way that really resonates with people, that really gets for people to say, you know what, hey, that's right. Like, you know, who are they to be telling us what to do? Who are they to be saying that, you know, we need to do this or we need to do that? They're all the way on the other side of the ocean. We can do our own things. You know, we've always done our own things. You know, back, you know, we came over here to get away from those people, you know, with the Puritans and all that stuff. So Paine's impact it dramatically expanded the public sphere where political discussion took place, and he pioneered a new style of political writing, engaging a far greater audience than anyone before him. Again, because talking to the common person, right? You know, instead of just talking in Latin and you know, basically, you know, writing essays like a dissertation or the way a professor would write, he was writing like the common person, because he was a common person, you know. So that's why again, I know I've been like gushing about Thomas Paine's Common Sense, but I really love it. It's really awesome for that reason. And his persuasions led the Second Continental Congress to sever the colony's ties with Great Britain. So this is where, we finally start to see, because again, there had been debate as to whether to stay in the British Empire or strike out on their own. Thomas Paine's Common Sense is what really turns the tide here. So this is where we get to the Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence declared that Britain's aim was to establish absolute tyranny over the colonies, and as such, Congress declared the United States an independent nation. So obviously, of course, they declared their independence on July 2nd, and then the Declaration of Independence was written and accepted on July 4th. So of course, that's why we have our Independence Day, July 4th, 1776. Jefferson's preamble gave the Declaration its enduring impact. I mean, we all know this, right? You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. And so the Declaration of Independence, again, I wish I could give this a little bit more time here, is the Declaration of Independence is so important because it signifies, again, and a lot of this goes back to the Magna Carta. It goes back to, you know, to all of these ideas put forth by the British Enlightenment period, that there are certain inalienable rights that the government has no right to get involved in. You know, there's the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as Thomas Jefferson puts. These are rights that no government can infringe upon. We can decide for ourselves. That's why pursuit of happiness is really important. And he departed from John Locke's assertion of right to property, because the pursuit of happiness is different from property, because not everyone wants to own property. You know, we decide for ourselves what happiness is for us. And so everyone has a different definition of what happiness is. Some people want to have a big house. Some people are just fine, just living wherever, and that's fine. That is their right to do so, because, and that becomes a unique and central element of American freedom. And this is also important because this also talks about the idea of American exceptionalism. This idea that America, and you will definitely see this more so in U.S. History Part 2, where America getting involved in the world wars and then fighting against the communists, in the Cold War. This idea that American is that that beacon of freedom and hope, and that we also see immigrants coming over to America to partake in that here. Okay, so really quickly, I want to just really quickly go through the last point, because I think we can sum up the war really quickly. So let's just kind of sum up the war really quickly here. So the war initially went bad for Washington. Many of his troops went home, but he was able to launch a surprise attack on Trenton and Princeton in New Jersey. This of course was his famous, crossing the Delaware, right? That's the famous painting where he's standing in the boat, right? Then of course, Thomas Paine also inspired the troops, through his reading of the American Crisis, because unfortunately at the time we did have, Washington's army dwindled down to about 3,000. It had been 20,000. It got down to 3,000. But now with some of these victories here, the Americans were starting to gain more momentum here. So the Battle of Saratoga gave the Patriots a victory and boost morale, because the two British generals, they had miscommunicated, and so they were supposed to meet up in Philadelphia, but they didn't, and so this allowed for the Americans to take Philadelphia here. The victory convinced the French to aid the Americans in 1778. So that was also important, right? That the Americans needed for the French and the Spanish to recognize them as a country and actually allow for them to gain their resources, right? Because, and again, you don't have to, let me rephrase this here. You didn't need to give the French an excuse to not fight against their rivals, the British. I mean, the French were kind of looking for any way to help out, but they weren't going to get involved unless they actually believed that the Americans could actually win. So in the winter of 1777 to 1778, the British were quartered in Philadelphia, plenty of supplies. American troops, half of whom were immigrants or African Americans, suffered at Valley Forge here. So this was kind of like the low point, but then of course we move on to the fighting in the South. This is where Cornwallis, starts to suffer some defeats here, and ultimately he is defeated at Yorktown, where the French surround Cornwallis, and ultimately, the Americans are able to defeat him with a strong assist from the French. And then the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, which basically gave the Americans control all the way to the Mississippi River, from the East Coast all the way to the Mississippi River. So, okay, that pretty much sums up everything that we needed to. So sorry that we kind of had to rush that here a bit. I definitely didn't give the American Revolutionary War as much credit as I should have. But again, the focus of this chapter is not necessarily the fighting. It's the focus on what led to the fighting. That's what is the real main important takeaway that I want y'all to get from this chapter is the reasons, right? The political reasons, and how the United States has decided to transform itself and gain its independence. And we will talk more about the process of independence, because yes, they did declare themselves independent, but then of course now comes the important task of building the nation. And we'll talk about that in the next couple of chapters when we talk about the Constitution, and we'll talk about further conflicts with the British, such as the War of 1812, and then we will talk about the rapid Western expansion, and then ultimately our class will culminate with the Civil War and Reconstruction. So I hope you all found this interesting. Sorry if I got a little bit kind of carried away with some of my lecturing here. It's just that I find this stuff really interesting. It's really interesting to talk about, especially on the political side. You can tell that, I mean, I love history, but can you all kind of tell that I'm definitely more of a political scientist? Like that's definitely, like, I love history, but political stuff is definitely more of my passion. That's definitely, like, I could just talk about politics all the time. Like, I just love that stuff. So, but anyways, but it ties in, both of them are really important, and they definitely do tie into each other. So, okay, all right, so let's go ahead and end for today. Thank you all so much for stopping by. Again, sorry about the confusion. We'll just meet on Wednesday. So You all take care, be safe. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. Good luck to you all in the exam. I'll see some of you all in person on Monday, and if you all want to take the test online, that's fine. Are there any questions that I can help you all with before we end for today? Does this make a lot more sense with the chapter 5? We'll work on chapter 6 next time. Okay, yes, okay, sounds good, Andy. Okay, very good. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you all so much. Good luck in your studying. Be safe, and have a good rest of your week and a good weekend. Thank you, and enjoy the nice weather. It's already going to get hot by tomorrow, so enjoy the nice weather while you all can. So, all right, goodbye, everybody. Take care.